considerations. So we'll pick up on that, and maybe because everyone's just come back from lunch, we'll start by showing a film, and then Ed is going to talk us through some of the practical considerations that he had to, as a facilitator, think about when supporting the students to make this film.
But before we show the film, I thought just to tell you the context of the project that this film sits within. As I mentioned earlier, we're trying to build more sustainable partnerships, partly for the reasons that Elhum was talking about. They work better for us from a practical, professional point of view, in terms of knowing we have an income. They work better in terms of the sort of wider purpose of the workshops, because we're able to create enduring relationships with an area. So we were actually giving a workshop like this, where we were talking about the school project, and someone from a university in East England saw us giving it and thought it would be useful to have us come and teach their students how to make films.
Oh, I see.
Is that okay? Oh.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to figure out the internet.
So it's with the University of East Anglia International Development Department. And as with many academic groups we're finding these days, they wanted their students to have the capability to use visual media in their research, particularly with something like development. They thought it was important to move on from the paradigm of white man, white woman, going to a third world country, writing their report on what's happening, and then lots of other dry academics reading it. Increasingly, it's becoming important in those spheres to hear from the people they're writing about or working with. So visual media fits very well within that. So we go to the International Development Department of University of East Anglia about 3 times a year and run similar workshops to the one we've been describing with their students, embedded to make films that are embedded in the local community. Obviously, they're not films about development issues directly all the time, because it's rural England, not Kenya. But we do our best, and more important, as always with our workshops, is the process. As important is the process as the product. And what we've created now, we think, is a really valuable, sustainable and ongoing resource, which also is valuable institutionally to the university, because they have started creating lots of relationships with their local community. We think the films we've made with their students and the films the students have made with the local community create kind of a bridge that wasn't there before. Many English universities are campus universities, so they're, I don't know in Italy whether it's the same, but they are outside the city, these monolithic organisations that don't really have any interaction with the community. And that distance is furthered when you take into account that these days there are more and more foreign students coming to study in England. So we've worked quite a lot with international students who have no contact with the local area until they come and do these workshops. And so, as well as being sustainable for us, the international students making these films about the local area are creating at least an online community and a series of relationships between local people.
So we thought...
Yeah, you can talk about the film. So we're going to show probably one of the most interesting... Well, we think it's probably one of the stronger films that have been made as part of the workshops, but also because of the subject matter. It was a very interesting process in terms of working with both the students and the contributors to create the film. But we'll talk a bit more about it after we've shown it. So.
But if you wanted to watch the films, they're all on this website, which is viewNR4.co.uk, which is the postcode of that region. And there's different ways you can look at the films, but one is an interactive map. So if you scroll in and out of the map, you can see the different areas that we've made films in. Oh, doing this the wrong way. You've got to like zoom in like this. And so it's really taking this idea of the place defined and the films that define that place. So you click in and you see different films that have been made by students there. Is this on? Oh, it is on. No? Okay, but it's okay because we're going to watch film now.
And yeah, I mean, I guess just to re-emphasize from a professional point of view, the first project we did with students, these one-off projects are very hard. Postcode films probably wouldn't exist if we kept relying on one-off projects, because it becomes very difficult to have time to apply for funding, and some you get, some you don't. So we think it's really valuable to try and find people with common aims, to, especially who have institutional weight and funding, and who can apply for grants and have the administrative time to do this, which we simply don't have. Yes.
In relation to funding to this particular project, have you tried to contact the tourism office? Because it seems like something quite interesting for the city of Norfolk to have a certain map that shows parts of the city done in that way. I mean, on the trails of Google Map, where everybody puts on, pictures and blah, 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 it could be quite interesting for the actual city to have something like that.
No, but we will.
Great.
Well, this is a partnership with the university, so in a sense, every project is funded by the university, so that's quite lucky. But you're right that if we wanted to broaden, then that would be the ideal route. Good producer, right there.
Yeah, and they would be a more... We have tried to have news coverage, but as usual with news, they want to sort of hook, and they want the stories they always look for. So this is doing something different and creating a kind of living archive. So the tourist board could be a useful one. Norwich, I don't know if you know, does anyone know Alan Partridge here? That's what Norwich is famous for. So
that's what they're most famous for.
This does something different. Anyway, here's the film.
Can we have the lights? And the sound.
So again, this was made by students over 5 days.
If I could write a song and get the world to sing along, think of all the music there would be. You can be sitting in a crowd.
Is there a little bit of sound?
No,
there
is no sound, non c'è suono.
There's a little bit of sound. Okay.
If I could write a song and get the world to sing along, think of all the music there would be. You can be sitting in a crowded room but feeling totally alone. And it's only then that you get in touch with your deep emotions, and sitting in a crowded room but feeling totally alone. And it's only then that you
ruining the film.
Una cortesia, potete trovare un altro video per vedere se dipende da questo video, perché noi non abbiamo toccato niente. Come stava prima? Perché come non abbiamo toccato, abbiamo fatto la pausa ed è rimasto tutto come stava prima. Quindi proviamo con un altro video, per cortesia, così vediamo.
Then it became more about Bill himself rather than the whole Butchers, and more about how he hasn't got a job anymore.
Our project is about the Somalian community on Anglesey Road.
Seen as it's Black History Month, they're not really an iconic country when it comes to the celebration, isn't it?
It's taking us on a tour through the street, all the different shops that have different facilities and stuff like that.
Like the sense of community, this place really holds a sense.
Is that working?
That was working.
Oh, this or no? Is that loud enough? Can you just turn it up?
It doesn't seem like we can.
I'm gonna hold.
You can be sitting in a crowded room but feeling totally alone. And it's only then that you get in touch with your deep emotions, and that's what comes out in your love of music or whatever you love.
I've been involved in music for the entirety of my adult life. I was a DJ and I've been in bands and I've written scores for plays. The most beautiful things in the world, you can hear them rather than see them. I'd rather be blind than deaf. What I had was a fairly glamorous career before I had eyesight problems. I lost the sight in my left eye overnight, and then a couple of years later the central vision in my right eye in a couple of seconds. 1 minute it was there and literally I looked up and it had gone. I lost my independence. The relationship I had at the time totally hit the toilet because I came completely financially and emotionally dependent on that person. Here we all know that we all know each other's issues. So this is a really safe place to come to.
You want me to take the dinner money?
Yeah, take that upstairs.
Yeah, thank you.
We was born premature. They gave us too much oxygen in Norfolk, Norwich when we was born, and that killed the octave nerves between the brain and the eyes.
That's what caused the blindness.
That's what caused the blindness.
Touch and hearing, that's what we got to go by.
Yeah.
That's the eyes are nothing, in other words.
The eyes are just ornaments there. They're nothing to us. They don't exist.
I've lost almost all of my central vision now. I can see lights. I can't see faces. I don't think I fully realised what it meant, what it would mean, how it touches absolutely everything you do from the minute you get out of bed. You have to think about every step you take. It's such hard work. So much is going on in your head. My brain goes 100 miles an hour. If you fire on all cylinders all the time, you are in danger of becoming emotionally exhausted.
Oh, you want that? And I can't remember the word.
Follow the rail there. Follow the rail up to the bar.
You feel safe coming here. You can feel independent. You can go and do what you want yourself, sort of thing.
Sit on the chair that
Well, talk to other people, have a drink. You just know the feel of the place in your mind where things are.
You know there's a rail here, don't you?
You know there's a rail there. We know there's rails there. If them rails were took away, we'd be lost.
We wouldn't know where we was then.
Well, you just try and best you can. Had to get on with life, don't you, really?
It's my music, making the world go round. People feeling sad would have a reason to be glad.
Maybe you need something very important to happen to you in your life to take stock of exactly what it means to be alive. Suffering or having lost things makes you think about what you still have. When you're performing, you are the same as anyone else. So that's the only time that I feel like I used to feel, like I feel like a normal person. Because I am normal, I still put my knickers on one leg at a time in the morning like everyone else.
I put mine on very easily in the morning. I don't give myself time to think about it and to dwell on it or feel sorry for myself. But then I've reached a stage where I'm in a heap sometimes. I'm exhausted, I haven't told anybody, I haven't talked to anybody. I'm really struggling with getting through. So, ups and downs, peaks and troughs. I do need a release, obviously. And this is my release. You're my salvation.
Well, it's a social centre for the blind. So, and blind and friends. We all socialise together and.
Yeah, we've never seen, so we've never known what colours are or nothing.
We never missed it because we never had it. So we don't worry about it. We just carry on this as if
if somebody said to me, "Would you like your sight back, Kenny?" I said, "Why?" I said, "I've managed for 60 years now. I'm going to change now, am I?"
I know.
If somebody like myself had our sight back, that could do more harm than good. Because you'd have to start life all over again, and the sudden shock of it could kill you. You got to make the best of life, boy. That's what you got to do.
Then if you feel a bit sorry for yourself, have a couple of glasses of whiskey before you go to bed.
Three Musketeers.
In this world I log out all my worries and my cares. In my room, in my room, do my dreaming and my scheming, lie awake and pray. Do my crying and
And everything? Is this on? Yeah. Was the translation okay? You could hear it and fast enough? Thank you, guys. Did you sing? Did they sing? So, sort of starting from the end, the film itself as a product, I think, hopefully speaks for itself in the value that it could have in terms of being useful for the social centre, for whether it be fundraising or awareness raising or any of those sort of fairly obvious things. But working backwards, all the process of making it was valuable for was valuable for both sides, the filmmakers and the contributors. There was an enormous amount of trust building that went on at the start before they were able to start filming, which for these students who are going to go out into the world and work in development and spend their lives probably working with the other, became a very valuable experience to go through. Obviously, when you're making a film about people who can't see, who are not going to be able to watch the film, you have an added layer of sensitivity and explanation. And we had a very carefully drawn out process when we went to the social centre, where their manager made sure that almost made sure that me and the filmmakers were aware of our imposition as much as the people being filmed were. So we all had to stand up and give a talk about ourselves, tell a story about ourselves, the equivalent, I guess, of being filmed and performing. And for the guys actually in the film, they said afterwards that it had been, and this often happens, we think, with these projects, an incredibly valuable experience from feeling like they'd been listened to, they'd had a chance to express themselves, and all these sort of intangible things like confidence and creativity that, while they can't be measured, do make, these little episodes can make a small difference in people's lives. So together with that and all the other films, we feel like it's a project that's got longevity and is creating both institutional relationships and a sense of community in that area. Nothing else?
Because we thought this would be an interesting example, because I suppose Ed, who was the facilitator on this project, had several layers of things to manage. I think just around lunchtime we were talking with several different people, talked about group cohesiveness, and this was really a project where that was incredibly important, both the cohesiveness of the filmmaking team, but just everyone all together, working together to make the film, both the people behind the camera and the people in front of the camera. So I don't know whether... sorry. Should I repeat? What did I say? Well, so around lunchtime we were talking about group cohesiveness, and this is a good film. Oh yeah, I switched it off. Sorry. Thanks. Okay, so I think what I was talking about group cohesiveness and how this is an example of how you know, as a facilitator you have a role to facilitate what's going on for both the people behind the camera and the people in front of the camera. So there were a couple of questions about group dynamics, and I don't know whether this is a good point to talk about that, or whether we should take all questions or discussions at the end, but maybe because it's just after lunchtime and everyone needs to kind of have some energy, we can have a discussion. If you want to suggest, you know, talk about any you know, facilitation questions, I suppose, group dynamic questions that you might have, or experiences that you've had and that we can relate to or talk about.
I think they filmed that very well, actually, in the end, but most of my time on projects and including that one, is not spent teaching how to get a great shot or whatever. It's about managing both sides. So I think when you're doing these projects, it's being in constant communication with everyone, especially with people who are blind, obviously explaining to them at every step of the process what's going on. And I'm always trying to give roles to people within the group to do that. So one person is filming, one person is, if you like, producing and explaining to them what's going to happen, why they're doing it, what the point of it is, whether that's okay, etc., etc. And on the other side, you always need to brief the filmmakers beforehand, and once you're in there, to be incredibly conscious, especially when they're somewhere like that, of their presence in the room, almost just on a physical level, because when you start filming, the tendency is to assume this position of power and completely forget about everything around you, and you can go anywhere with the camera, and it's your right because you're making a film, and also you're at the same time scared because of the technology and you're trying to get it in focus. But actually, with these projects, what's important is to take a step back and think about what you're actually doing in the room rather than the beauty of the shot in the first place. So you're not walking into people, or you're not in the way of people. And I think harnessing a group to work together on both sides of the camera is vital for all these processes.
Definitely. I think a lot of it is people skills. So actually maybe 75% of the film is people skills. And that's the case whether you're making a film or a creative project on your own, or whether you're making it with a group of people, or whether you're facilitating a group of people to make something. It's 75% people skills. So the teamwork is really key, and making sure that's smooth. And the best way probably to make sure that's smooth is by constant communication with the people who the camera is pointed at. I think that's a really key element.
Did anyone like the film? Dislike the film? Have any questions?
Are there any questions? Ah, wait. Okay. So.
You need to wear your headphones.
Yes, I wear my headphones. What's the ringing?
Posso? Si sente o no? Houston, abbiamo un problema. Ok. Volevo fare una domanda sulla fase preliminare, che probabilmente... Cioè,
No, sorry,
no.
2 minutes.
Yes.
To go closer to her?
Yes, too close.
Closer? Okay.
Se no ti do...
Sì, no.
Ah, yeah. It's my fault, I'm sorry. I'm so very much sorry. Volevo fare... Adesso senti?
Ah, yes.
Yes? Ok. Sorry. Volevo fare una domanda sulla fase preliminare, perché a prescindere dal tempo che ci è voluto per girare, volevo chiedere come è stato gestito il contatto prima. Mi è capitato di lavorare con la progettazione partecipata in un quartiere ad alto rischio a Roma, ma ha condotto ad un evento poi il workshop, diciamo, non ad un film, e abbiamo dovuto lavorare tanto tempo prima, cioè almeno 3 mesi sul territorio, per creare i link con gli abitanti della comunità e poi avere anche gli accessi, perché per esempio all'interno di questo quartiere c'era una zona che era off limits anche per gli abitanti del quartiere, quindi emarginazione nell'emarginazione. Abbiamo dovuto trovare delle guide, okay, degli Sherpa in questo, e mi domandavo se c'è stato prima del girato comunque una fase in cui si è stabilita una fiducia, una confidenza fra chi doveva girare e quanto è durata, cioè quanto tempo ci è voluto.
Okay, go. Great question.
I think there's two parts, I guess. One is because we have now been working with the university in this area of England for 4 years. We have a lot of contacts and references. We meet a lot of people. So that's one big advantage of having this ongoing partnership. That, for example, we just did a workshop in October and we made a film in a pub, which is very popular with the locals. But we'd been talking to that pub for 2 years about the possibility of making a film. So that's another reason for trying to develop these institutional partnerships. And then the way we structure the course is not ideal. More time would be better. But we have either a 1 or a 2 day workshop sometime before the main filming week, where we go up to the university, meet this year's students, introduce them to ways of filmmaking, much like the stuff we talked about. So we spend time watching films, ethical considerations, a bit of practical training, and then a lot of time is devoted to thinking through ideas and workshopping ideas, and then contacting people initially then to see whether it might be possible. Then in the time in between that first workshop and the main week, they go and visit them, hopefully sort of do a mini interview, and then when we start the week after, they come back and pitch the idea again based on their conversations. And we have templates which we ask them to fill in, which include things like logistical things like, is it, can you do it on that day? Ethical things like, have they thought through everything? And then more creative visual stuff. How are they going to make a film? And how have they explained that to the people they're working with? So it would be nicer to have even longer. Like with the school one, they had a longer period of meeting and greeting, but the realities of the term time at the university mean that we do it this way. But it's definitely necessary. We do this other workshop with them where we just turn up for 2 days, and that is much more just about practical. We just train them how to use a camera rather than having time. You need the gap, you're right, to be able to create the relationships in order to create a strong film.
One of the things that we often find... One of the things that
I worked with a bigger dimension in a neighborhood, so
Mm-hmm.
it was bigger within 3 months.
But that's the better way to work, is to work over a longer period of time, because you establish a real trusting relationship. What we
an amazing experience. By
Yeah.
the way.
I can imagine it must have been. What we often find with students who are learning to use film for the first time in this way, when we do our introductory session, we suggest that they go to find ideas, and not everyone does. Not everyone uses that time to research and to find ideas, but every single one of those students at the end of the process says, oh, I wish I spent longer researching. And I think it's very difficult to communicate it without having been through it. But once you've worked on a project, you realize how valuable it is to spend time with people before you film with them. And often the films that get made within the workshops are the ones that have had a period of, are the ones that someone has looked into or spent time with, or really been to meet the people and spent time with them and established a relationship, and that's what makes the stronger film, always. This is an example of the production planning sheet that we give students. It's a kind of condensed one so that it fits on the PowerPoint. But basically, what Ed said, first thing is to summarize the film in one line. This is quite useful just as a pitching tool. You should be able to speak about any project that you're doing in one line. It's useful to always have that ready. I call it, well, it's called an elevator pitch. You're always ready to have for your elevator pitch. If you're stuck in an elevator with one person who would be really, really useful for your project, you need to be able to give them one line that will make them interested in it. So the one line to summarize your film is really useful to have. Then it goes into more detail. The obvious things. What's it about? Why does it interest you? What makes it visual? This is very important with students who might not necessarily have worked with film before, to think about, why is this a film? Why is it interesting visually? Why is it not a radio program or an article, for example? And another thing, what actuality could you film, meaning what is going to happen in front of the camera? A meaningful story is not going to be necessarily just talking heads, interviews. It's got to have something happening in it. We ask them to think about their interviews, who they'll speak to, what they'll ask, why, list some ideas. Access is very important, just logistically. Ethical, we talked about that earlier, but obviously that's really important. And then finally, it's the big question, really. It's what the film is really about. The surface of films are always one thing, and the deeper meaning of it is probably something else, and often something very personal to the people making the film. So that's quite an interesting and important thing to find out earlier on, if possible.
Can I ask something? What's
Yeah.
the difference between the first and the last point? Can you please explain that more?
La differenza tra la prima e l'ultima.
Summarize the film in one line, and the film really about. So
somehow they overlap, but still.
Yeah.
When you pitch, when you say summarize the film in one line, it's like you're telling about the film and what is this about.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, you might say, for example, summarize the film in one line could be something. Like it could be like say the butcher shop, the butcher film. You could say that this is a film about Kennedy's, the longest standing butchers in Deptford that's closing down this year. What's the film really about? Well, the story is a kind of microcosm. It highlights a kind of broader issue or a broader idea, and it's really about disappearing traditions or, cultures and, impacts of changing communities in an area. That's not really the summary of the film, but that's really like the meat of it. And
labour, a man and labour, and yeah.
Yeah, one I guess is a description. The last bit is also about really questioning your personal motivations, like what's taking you to this subject, why are you so interested in it? And it's about being honest with yourself, because the more you're honest about what really attracts you to an idea, the more vulnerable it makes you as a filmmaker, which is a difficult position to be in, but it's a very valuable one. It will help you get into a subject in a deeper way. But B, it will help you also shape the film in a more realistic way from the outset, I think.
Just on another, is that okay? On another point, Matteo was asking at lunch, I think, how we get the group to choose the idea. Is that right? Because if you have 15 people with 15 ideas for films, how do you manage that? So this feeds into it, this production plan having them pitch their idea to each other on camera as well is a crucial part of the process for us, because people have 5 minutes to present the idea they have hopefully researched, and through that you discover how carefully they've thought about lots of different things. We have a discussion afterwards where many ideas, it's obvious that there are big problems in terms of organisation or preconceptions, etc. So some fall away straight away. But in general, we devote quite a lot of time to that part of the workshop, so that, and then we have a vote if necessary, where people can rank their films 1, 2, 3. And it's surprising how that people are allowed to vote for their own film, but it's surprising how often, actually, after you've gone through that process, people don't, and it's the same. Maybe it's you have one idea too many that people congregate around, because once you've talked through all the realities and practicalities of making the film, then people are generally happy to stick with certain ideas.
So we try to be as democratic as possible in that period, and people getting together around an idea it means also that they'll be prepared to work together to make it work. And I think working together means sometimes one person does more of this and another person does more of that, or you assess what your strengths and skill sets are, and according to that you work out who does what in the group as well. If we were talking also just about roles within groups, and as facilitators, when you're filming and editing, it's quite nice to almost impose like rotation, just so that everyone gets a sense of things. Though it's useful to get a sense of people's skill sets. So if you know that someone's particularly strong on camera and you've got a really tricky sequence or something that's quite important to the film coming up, as a group you can probably agree that that person should probably film at that time, whilst making sure that everyone gets a chance to film overall. And I think that's the skill in kind of facilitation. I'm also a producer, so I have no problem telling people to do things.
Elhum's groups always finish filming and editing 2 days before me. So, I mean, the other thing to say is maybe it's our fault for not budgeting properly, but all our projects we work way beyond the time allocated and spend an awful lot of time in between sessions going back and forth, helping people with their ideas, which is really necessary and kind of I can't think of a way around it.
So something like this, for example, if we had 2 weeks before, 1 month before the workshop, we'd have a one day where we'd think about ideas and we'd talk through films and watch things and try out the cameras and learn all about the technical side of things. In between, and at the end of that session, we'd get this production sheet and people would put their ideas down and then have about 2 weeks to research them. During those 2 weeks, we do usually set deadlines. What happened? Set deadlines for students to send the production plans back to us, and we'll have Skype meetings with them to talk them through. And so we are constantly present. It's amazing. It's yeah.
And also talk to the contributors as well, if necessary, because sometimes, a bit of experience helps. Is it? Should we show?
Can I ask you something?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Would you like the microphone?
No, thank you.
Okay, I'll translate.
Do you have an audience in mind when you pre-plan your shooting?
Audienza?
Yes, who do you show your films to, and where? Because it seems to me that, I think I'm wrong, might remain within the community yourself or the people who are working or just a small group of people? Try to explain.
Allora, chi è l'udienza per il film? All'inizio del progetto. So, I mean, immediately, the answer is we have a screening with, well, for example, this project with the university, the filmmakers and the people in the films and anyone they want to invite. But it completely depends on the project and also the energy of the filmmakers and the people involved as to how far after that the film can go. The school screening, we had a massive community screening which went well, and then the film travelled quite a lot to various community events and fora, which again was partly because we had institutional support to do that. We had probably the best. I mean, we're keen to enter them into festivals, but we explain that to the students as part of their responsibility as filmmakers to uphold the relationship. One film we had did travel all over the world and was part of a youth filmmaking. What was it called? One Human Rights Film Festival.
Human Rights Watch Film Festival, and it was also in London Film Festival.
Okay, so and then there's obviously the internet, and I don't say that sort of to sort of say it's rubbish. The Anglesey Road was viewed many times because people want to see things about Somalian community.
Is your question about us, like, do we project an audience for students from the outset?
No, I was thinking maybe let's take the film about the blind social center.
Mm-hmm.
Give you this.
Sorry. Is it online? Thank you.
The blind center?
Yeah.
No, it's not.
It's the only one.
It's the only one that's not online.
You can explain why.
Because previously I was talking about the tourist board, which is not really, I didn't see the content, so I don't think it's really good. But at the same time, it helps lots of people who have relatives knowing the fact that a center like that exists, and so perhaps screen the film in different places outside the circuit or the community you've been shooting with.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe in different piazzas around the city or outside the city, in order to not to use it as a vehicle of publicity for the center, but still as a vehicle for let people know that this kind of center exists. So I was wondering whether you do screenings also outside the specific circuits that you're used to.
Okay. Do you organize these events, or it's up to the directors, actually?
So I think it's a bit of both, right? That actually, the blind film has been shown. The Blind Centre film has been shown, along with a few other films from the workshops at a couple of other film festivals. I think I mean, maybe it's related to the boundary thing that Elhum was talking about. Realistically, we can't commit, and we try and pass on to the filmmakers that it's their responsibility to share it in certain places. We do organise events from time to time. For example, in the summer we had a big public screening of all these films. But obviously, well, not obviously, we don't have the resources to do it all the time. So when we see an opportunity, we will do it. But we make it available and explain to the people who we're making the film with that there are all sorts of opportunities to share it. Some students made a film about bell ringers, which has travelled all over the country and apparently inspired bell ringers to campanilistas. Is that what they're called? Yeah. Yeah. So I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a combination, really.
We do our best, but I think to an extent, realistically, you have to pass that on to the people involved. We have avenues, but
yeah, I mean, all of the films are generally, they're all on our website. We've got different pages. We have different partnerships. So short film channels, for example, or platforms that showcase films about social issues or human rights films do have channels for films that have been produced within our workshop. So it is wider than just the community that we immediately know about. But beyond those partnerships, well, we don't have the capacity as a small collective to send the films out to festivals constantly, but also that's the responsibility that directors should also take, and that a lot of directors do, which is good. And that's part of the learning, that to be responsible for a film means that you're the person who's filmed it, you've edited it, you're the person who has to go and give it to the people who are in the film. That's a really important thing, that follow-up, and to stay in touch, and to tell them when it's online, and to tell them when it's being screened somewhere locally, so that they can be involved in that as well. That's a big learning, as a director or someone who makes films or any kind of project. The day that you sit next to the person who's in the work that you've produced and watch it with them or experience it with them, because that's really when you realize the weight of the responsibility that you have towards that person, and you need to walk through the whole process, I think. I can't remember where the question came from. Yeah? Are there any other questions about anything? No? Yeah? Is there a really bad buzzing? Yeah? Yes. Oh, sorry. Okay, so that's our production plan sheet. We thought we'll stop talking about our own work and talk about some other work that is really strong and really that we can learn a lot from. And so we're going to show you a short film. It's about 10 minutes long, called Bread Makers. It's by a Palestinian filmmaker, but who's based in the UK, called Yasmin Feder, who's also an anthropologist. So, of course, we approve. And I won't tell you very much about the film, but I have a short video that she recorded to talk about the film with me on Skype. So, embarrassingly, I'm actually in that as well. But we'll start by seeing the film, and we can talk about it afterwards. But what's really fantastic about Bread Makers is that there was a lot of thought put into the film in relation to who the film was made with, and how to incorporate the characters in the film into the kind of the creative filmic side. So they influence the choices around the way the film was made, but also the soundscape and things like that. Does that make sense? Good. Right. Oh, here we have Bread Makers. So, we're ready? Yeah.
There's no words in it, by the way.
James. How are you? I'm fine. Are you ready to give me your bread order? Take it away. 2 rooms. Hold on, 2, let me see. 1 oatmeal and 5 biscuits for today. Is that everything? Okay, thank you, James. Goodbye. Goodbye.
You should have put it over there in the first place.
Venga, che c'è?
That was a bit big. See that one?
Tell him to go swimming, Sean. Tell him to go swimming. Shawnee. Good lad. Spider-Man. Okay, it's tea break, everybody. Time for tea break.
Fantastic. Thanks, Thomas. Should we get some milk out of the fridge?
Yeah. You look well.
Yeah.
Goose.
There's some brilliant people work here. It's all very inspiring. Yeah.
So I'll give 60 pence for those. And how much are these ones?
Yeah.
That's a rye bread, isn't it?
Ah.
How much are these? That's a rye bread, I think.
What do you think about the film? Did you enjoy it? I really love this film. I think it's, well, first of all, it's the bakery that's really fantastic, but she does a fantastic job at capturing the energy of the space, and you know, you can feel that she's there, but she's also kind of... Did any comments about the film or about wonderings?
I like the audio treatment.
Yeah, the audio is really well thought of. So hopefully this won't be too difficult to translate. So I have the director talking about different aspects of the film, particularly some of the things that we talked about this morning. So getting consent from all the participants, because not all of them are verbal. So devising ways to make, to get consent from everyone who's in the film, and just talking more about the process of how she put it together, how it worked, and good things to think through. Oh, where did I put it? Ah, sorry, I have to find it again. It's about 3 minutes and 3 minutes. So in the corner you can see me in my kitchen, and then you can see Az in her living room. So didn't think about that whole thing before we taped this, but hopefully it's useful to see. Right, so can you tell me what Bread Makers is about, how the idea came about, and what it was that you wanted to make?
Bread Makers is a 10-minute documentary about a bakery that employs lots of adults with learning difficulties and set in Edinburgh. The idea came about from a call out for films on the theme of white, which was through the Scottish Documentary Institute. So I submitted an idea based around bakery and white noise, just because it was a very industrious space. But also I'd worked there for about a year, so I knew the space really well and most of the people in the film really well. So that was kind of what inspired me to do it, because it was an inspiring, positive picture, I guess, of adult learning difficulties. So that's kind of how it came about. Yeah.
Cool, okay. And can you tell me something of, well, the ethical dilemmas that you had in terms of representing people within the
Yeah. So this was quite a tricky thing. Basically, most people so the bakery employs people who don't have learning difficulties and people who do have learning difficulties. But I knew that a lot of the people I was filming weren't going to be able to sit down and explain to me just in normal verbal language why they were there or what they liked about it or what they didn't like about it. So I had to think of another way to represent this space and kind of the feeling it generated for people who work there. So that's why I decided to have no voiceover whatsoever, and basically no interviews or anything, and not really distinguish who is who, just to kind of show it as a space. So in terms of representation, I kind of didn't want to distinguish so much who had a disability and who didn't, just because everyone, even though they supported each other, but everyone sort of worked together, and that was kind of more the stronger point I wanted. So that was the main thing. So then we had to find ways also to, obviously I had people's trust, so because I'd worked there and they knew me quite well, so that helped in them letting me film them kind of at work and at ease. And to get their permissions also, we couldn't explain to everybody exactly what this film was. Obviously it's hard to tell people about editing as well. So we had to devise like another way to do it. So the centre that this bakery is a part of, it's part of the larger centre for other workshops, devised a release form but based on like a pictorial sign-along kind of language. So it's like simplified pictures. So camera, permission, contract, and things like this, which we gave to everybody who needed it. Unless they needed a normal written one, they got that. But and then through that, tried to get everybody just involved, you know, in the whole thing. So yeah.
Cool. Okay, that sounds great. Do you want to say a little bit about how you incorporated white noise?
Yeah, that was quite an abstract thing. But what we did with the soundtrack was to kind of unify the film in a way. We really worked on the soundtrack, but in a way sort of subtly, so you might not realize that we did that much to it, but we actually did quite complex sound design, but we wanted it to blend in with the atmosphere of the place. So we really used a lot of the like working industrial sounds in the background. Sometimes we made them rhythmical. We would stop all those sounds when they were having a break or when they're outside or somewhere else, so you kind of feel like you're in a separate space, you know, but it's kind of really subtle, I think. So that's what we did, basically, just because it also evoked the space, you know, all the noise and chatter and banging and everything going on, so.
Cool, okay. Then I realised that I had more questions, so I Skyped her again.
Put it back in.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, so another thing, and this is kind of the anthropological thing, I guess, is sometimes when you film docs, you ask people to do stuff again if you missed it, or you kind of need them to do something like walk out the door, or make some tea, or whatever. And it was a little bit difficult to do that with all the individuals in the bakery. Some people it was quite easy and straightforward, but the people who I couldn't just say, you know, so-and-so, can you please do that thing again, or can we film you from the other side doing it? Since we couldn't do that, we just had to basically stand and wait, you know, for things to happen. So that was kind of the like very observational thing,
yeah,
you know,
much more anthropological.
So like, even though it looks like a really simple, quick film, you know, we were shooting for 10 days, all day, and until we got those moments. And like, there's bits in it where someone's singing or saying something that we really like. We couldn't plan that. We just had to be there, holding the camera, waiting until it happened, you know. Like, I knew something would happen. I didn't know what, but I knew that the place to recognize that stuff. So I guess that's the kind of like research that I'd done for a year before anyway, but then wait for it. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, okay, great. So just a little bit of insight into the backstory. Okay. Any comments or questions? Yeah? Yes,
This one?
Per favore, buonasera. Volevo sapere esattamente in un film come questo come... Sì.
Is it on channel 2? Yeah, it should be on the right channel.
Sì, gentilmente. Volevo sapere come si fa in un film come questo, quindi a registrare anche come è cambiata l'idea, diciamo, di questa piccola comunità nel momento in cui appunto anche io spettatore non ho appunto modo di avere il sonoro, quindi come posso dire una narrazione delle persone, diciamo, comunque coinvolte nel progetto. Questo nel prima e nel dopo. Quindi la curiosità è anche sapere se i vostri film poi vengono ripresi a distanza di tempo per vedere i cambiamenti di queste comunità che voi filmate, quindi nel corso magari a distanza di un anno o mesi. Grazie.
So, just if I understood correctly, like in relation to film, or so.
The question in generale.
Oh, in general, yeah. So not in relation to the filming.
Not only.
Well, my feeling is that this film, for example, is about it's about that space and kind of that. it's like a portrait of like a day in the life portrait or a slice of that place, if that makes sense. It's not so much about recording a change, if that makes sense. But that could be a focus of a film. If I understood correctly, did I understand correctly?
That's what I thought.
Yeah. Does that make sense? No.
Sorry, because I can.
It's not in.
No. Doesn't work. Non funziona.
No. Please, could you repeat?
So I was saying, well, is it to do with the film at the point in time at which it was recorded, or is it's to do with the subject matter of the film in time, so over a longer period of time? Your question is about a longer period of time, right? So I suppose it depends on the focus of the film, and maybe more with a film like the one we just saw, it would be possible to do that if that was the aim of the film. With the workshops that we've run, it's more often been more specific time frame, or it's not linked to time and changes in time, simply because the projects aren't based in a long enough time frame. One of the examples that I was going to talk through to do with photography, which probably we'll talk about tomorrow, is about relationships and film and projects over time, and how that captures kind of different emotions and progress and changes over time. So I think it is very possible to do that. It just depends what the aim of the project is at the outset. Does that answer?
Yes.
I suspect, again, with the university partnership that we will go back and make films in the same places if it continues. So I think, again, that's why we want to have this sustainable relationship, so that we can return to things and look at how a place is changing. But it's not our number one target.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because it does also tie into the importance of making things sustainable, and of staying in touch with the people you make films with, rather than about, if that makes sense. But we never have actually revisited a specific project or made a follow-up to compare what something's become. And I don't know why. It's a good idea.
We've nearly done other projects with some of the people in the Blind Centre film. There's a workshop in the same city where they go and work, and I think they sew and make cushions. So again, that will probably happen, and it will happen because we exist as the link between all the films and the community, because the students always change. But it'll be to do with all the access and that sort of thing. So we will only do it when we're ready. And they're ready.
L'ultima cosa, l'interesse più insomma, vivo per me spettatore è anche capire il processo del film e quindi il racconto della sua nascita. Ecco perché tutto ciò che non si vede sembra essere anche molto molto importante dal mio punto di vista, che non il prodotto finale. Era giusto per questo, volevo chiarire il senso della mia domanda. Grazie.
Well, that's really interesting, but I don't know necessarily that it's what everyone thinks when they watch a film. If you're involved in creating films or creative project, then you think a lot more about how something's come about, how it's been made, how it's possible to film this. But if you don't, I think you focus much more on the story. And, because a film, when you see a film, you'll never know what didn't go into the film. You'll never know what came before and what goes after. You focus on what's there, and that will always be the case. So I suppose with more reflexive films, it's interesting to look at that process. And a lot of filmmakers have started to incorporate that process into their work so that you see how something comes about. And that's a style. But it's a style that students are also free to adopt if they wanted to tell that story within the film as well. But it's not one that students have chosen to do yet. Maybe it's also because the films are quite short. And if they were longer, there would be more space for that reflexivity that you're alluding to. But I work with two filmmakers actually who are very, very reflexive in their approach and who include a lot of themselves on screen. The film that I showed you the poster of this morning that was filmed in Yemen, it's made by a filmmaker who's very, very present in the picture. He's on screen, he's talking, and he's even, suggesting things that could happen. So, for example, the story of that film is that he spends all this time in Syria waiting for something to happen in 2010 and doesn't manage to find a character that tells the story he wants to tell. He doesn't find a character he feels close enough to communicate what he feels is happening in the country on screen. So he goes to Yemen because two of his friends have said, there's this guy in Yemen, you'd get along with him so well. He's a tour guide operator, you should meet him. So he goes to Yemen, he meets this guy, and they're on tour in the north of the country, and a protest square starts in the capital. And he's really annoyed that his main character, who's a great guy, is not interested in the revolution. So he's thinking, this is really annoying. I'm in the middle of a revolution, but my main character is not interested in the revolution. So the film becomes very much about that. And little by little, actually, the main character does become interested in the revolution. And he is part of I don't know necessarily the reason, but he's pushing him. He's saying, come on, let's go to the square. Let's go to the square. We should see this. And they do go to the square. And when they're in the square, Case, the main character, feels that the square is different to what he thought it was. So he doesn't change because of the filmmaker, but the filmmaker being there and pushing him changes what he might have done. And that whole process is in the film, and it's very transparent. And he talks to camera, and they have a very transparent relationship as well. So I think reflexivity like that is completely possible. But it's also a style, and it's a much longer film style in a sense because it takes up a lot of space and becomes another layer in itself of the filmmaking. But it's very interesting, particularly anthropologically, and thinking about how the film has come about. But even with that level of reflexivity on screen, there are still things that you have to choose between. So you choose to keep some things and you choose to leave some things out because you're still telling a story, and that story needs to make narrative sense to an audience. So you have to make selections anyway all the time so that makes sense. Are there any other questions about any of the things we discussed this morning? No?
No, io sono curiosa se la vendita del pane è aumentata dopo lo screening. It's just a curiosity.
I don't know whether I can answer that question, but maybe. It's a film that's been really, really around the world. It traveled so much, and I think it's filmed from 2009 or 10, and I still screen it all the time. I think it's fantastic. But I don't know whether the sale of the bread has gone up.
Within the community.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got another hour, and during that hour we were going to talk a bit about funding. I don't know whether that's a useful thing. It's very different to what we've been talking about, and it's very much about how to approach and think about and pitch, much more than saying this person or this organization has loads of money, because that's more, well, that's a research job and it's more difficult anyway, but the more important thing is how to pitch properly and deliver strong pitches and strong proposals. So we have some tips around that. But why don't we take a 10-minute break before that? Yeah? Okay. Don't look at the clock on my computer because it's wrong. But why don't we come back at 5 o'clock?
No, that's in 3 minutes.
Oh, it's really wrong.
10 minutes. 10 past.
10 past. Okay, 10 past 5. Yeah? Perfect.
I'm not going to say anything next week. Well, actually, tell me if I can. Because
well, read what I'm going to.
Case Bianche, Paolo VI, Taranto.
Okay, so we've got just under an hour for the next bit. So this is another practical, thinking through practical things, and there's no magic solution for international funding for participative projects, but it is really useful to know and think about how to approach funders. So I just put down some ideas and wanted to talk through some websites and ways of finding out about funders and how to approach them, which I think can be useful and come from experience I've had both developing projects but also as a producer. So in both of these roles you're constantly pitching ideas and you're taking every opportunity you can to pitch those ideas. So probably a first thing is, as I was saying with the film projects, always be prepared to pitch your project. Always have it at your fingertips. Always have your elevator pitch ready, because you don't know who you're going to meet. And that's not a cynical thing. It's just that we work in a creative industry and different people can get involved in different projects that you're involved with and bring different things to it. And it's always good to think, we say out of the box, meaning to think about it in lots of different ways, to think about all the different angles of a project and all the different avenues that you can go down to see how you can make it happen. But to start with something a lot more practical, I thought I'd start by basically talking through websites websites. So I think one of the main funders for a lot of activity that takes place internationally particularly are embassies, the cultural arms of organizations. So places like the local council here, or it might be the British Council, it might be the Goethe Institute, it might be the French Institute, it would be the cultural arms of different countries. And that's a great place to start if you want to work internationally. It might not necessarily be a funding thing, but it might be a making links and partnerships thing. So taking British Council Italy as an example, I made a little screen grab of their homepage. So this is what you see when you go on to British Council Italy's website. I think the main thing with any funder that you're going to look into and try to approach and speak to about a project is, first of all, finding out what they do. And you can do this really by, it's like a research period, and it might take time, but it's so useful to understanding who it is that you'll be speaking to. So you can see from this that British Council Italy has a really big focus on promoting English language training. It's the main thing on its homepage. It's not the only thing, but it is one of the key things. And that's probably completely normal. The British Council has a remit to support British culture, and one of the main conduits for that is language. So if I was thinking about setting up a workshop and I wanted simultaneous translation for participants coming from the UK, then maybe I could approach British Council Italy and say, look, we've got these great practitioners from the UK. We want to make their work accessible to an Italian audience. This is one of the ways to make sure that will happen. Can you help us with that? That would be one way of involving them in quite a small way, but a significant partnership in terms of what they do and in terms of what you want to do. But that's just an example. So looking at this page, you see all the different things that they do. If you wanted to fundraise for an arts and culture project, first thing, click into arts and culture, the little tab that's there, and you see a list of all the different areas that they're active in. So just have a scroll through all of these things, you know, have a look at what they've funded, have a look at what they're involved in, have a look at the schemes that they run. And you'll learn a lot more about the organisation by doing that. You'll be in an informed position if you speak to anyone from there about their projects. So taking film as an example, this is their homepage, and you can see from what they've supported that it is a lot of, again, so it's supporting the National Theatre Live, which is a UK-based scheme of filming the theatre and showing it at the cinema, which is hugely successful in the UK. The second thing is bringing filmmakers from the UK to take part in festivals. So there's a director who is part of Rome Independent Film Festival, and then there's a second focus on a British director called Ben Rivers. Called Ben Rivers. And these are the three main things that the film connections people have done through the British Council. But when you study a page like this, have a look at the language that's being used. So to me, the main thing here is that it's called New Connections. All of the three things that they've supported are new projects. So they're young, emerging directors. They're connections, so they're bridging cultures. So they're bridging, Italy and the UK through new initiatives. The National Theatre Live is a new initiative. It's a new digital cultures initiative that's very successful in the UK. So they're really interested in forging new relationships in relation to film, in relation to how we consume film, but also in relation to emerging film talent. So get a sense of what it is that funder or that potential partner is actually interested in. And that's what I mean by reading the website. Look at read between the lines, and not even between the lines, just actually read what they do. And from that, get a sense of whether the project that you want to do might interest them or be relevant to them. So, and really with websites, they're an incredible resource to getting to know people and things. You can click into at least 7 things on this one page. So if you're going to approach them, you need to do that for every single one of them and know what they've supported and what they support. So the next thing is about getting in touch. So to get in touch with an organisation, I suppose there are lots of different ways of going about it, and I think this is a really key example of how you can, you can approach something in different ways. You can, if you scroll down this page, which I can't do because this is a PowerPoint, but there is a film email at the bottom of this page, which you can email. You can also go to the About Us section on the website and find an email there. What you realize when you go there is that they also have a tab called Success Stories. So in your research, this kind of thing is really crucial. Have a look at what they consider to be a success for British Council Italy. That success will determine what their remit is. What are they most interested in? So their successes are mainly around students learning English, but they do also have successes around people who've taken part in training workshops and who found them particularly beneficial to their work. Oh, and then if you dig a little more in the website, you can also find other contact details which are specifically for departments. So there aren't always clear pathways, but there are lots of different ways to find contact addresses within generic websites. And I really recommend spending time just looking through all of them and actually contacting all of them, particularly if they're generic, so you might get an answer from one of them. So, I'll just drink some water. So getting in touch, I think there are lots of different ways you can find out about something and get in touch with someone. The first thing is the generic email that I just showed you. It's very simple. For most organizations, you can find a generic email on their website. But there are other ways that you can also get in touch with organizations. And it might be nice to consider these different ways to learn about what they do. Attending an event that's been organized or that's been funded by a funder that you're interested in is a really good way to learn about their work and possibly also then meet the people who maybe you want to speak to. It sounds a little cynical, like I'm telling you to set it all up, but actually it's just a much better way of understanding what it is that that funder is actually interested in and interested in supporting. If you're able to go to someone or to even write an email and say, you know, I was at this new talent event that you sponsored a couple of weeks ago. It was very inspiring. This is what I appreciated about it. I thought you might be interested in this project. It's similar. That's actually a good starting point. It means that you've taken interest in what they do and what they're there for. So that's one way. That's another way that you can consider to get in touch with an organisation. Contacting people directly is often the ideal scenario, the ideal solution. If you have a direct email or a direct contact, then do just get straight in touch. But be aware that your direct pitch to someone you don't know is your only pitch. So be careful about how you do it. And in the next slide, I've got some tips about that. And another way that can be very useful is to get introduced. So if you know someone who has been funded by a funder or has worked with an organisation or some way that would make sense, get introduced and ask them to recommend you or recommend your work. So I think there are several ways of going about things. Like, never think that something is inaccessible to you. If you've really been through their website and you feel that they would really support the work that you're doing, there's no reason why they wouldn't. It's just a case of making that connection. But the main thing is that, well, as I said at the very beginning, remember that you're always pitching and you're inviting someone to be interested in something that you're really interested in, but they know nothing about. So you need to tell your story, you need to pitch it well, and you need to pitch it well the very first time. So be prepared. So I've got some tips on writing a strong email. They're just some things that I guess I get so many emails, it's crazy. And so when people write nice emails that are really short and structured and useful, it makes me very happy. And I think you can write very short emails that have an incredible amount of information in them. It's just about being very well considered with your words. So to start with, the first thing that isn't even in the email but so useful is the subject line. You can use this in quite a useful way. Use it so that it says from the outset, it's the first thing that someone will see along with your name. If they don't know your name, then at least make your subject line something that they'll recognize. So if you met someone, you can say, nice to meet you. It's a good way of saying that they should know who you are, and give them an additional reference. So, nice to meet you, postcode project. Or if you want to have a meeting with them and you don't know them, but you've got a slight reference that would be of interest to them, include that. So, for example, Women Directors Bird's Eye View Meeting. It's another organisation I work with. Or if you have a reference point, so if someone has given you their email address and you want to make sure they open it because they'll know that person, you'll say, okay, this is a short film via Maura Riley, for example. So that's a lot of information packed into one line that's not even in the email. Quite useful to use that well. In the main body of the email, I'd always keep emails short. The shorter the better, and you can put all extra information in an attachment. If someone's interested in what you're saying, they'll open it up. So basically all you need is your introductory lines, something nice to say, one line about your project, so your one-line pitch, one line about why you're emailing, and a closing line that suggests that you're open to a conversation if that sounds like a good idea. And basically that's it. I think the shorter the email, the better. You can include a lot of information about yourself in your signature. So your signature can be very relevant to what you've just emailed. In your signature, include links. So include a link to your website, for example. Includes project titles that you might have. Include your contact details. Make sure that all of those are there. And include an attachment with more information about your project. So if it's interesting, the attachment will be opened. And I think that's the best way of approaching someone for the very first time, because you're not overloading them with information. You're giving them the option, and it's like you're pricking their interest in something and inviting them to be a part of it. So just an example is that I've got different signatures depending on different projects. And so depending on who I'm emailing, I'll use the different signature. So one of them, for example, is places more focus on the Kino Futures project that I'm the coordinator of at Postcode Film. So it focuses on film in post-Soviet republics. And sorry. And so that's the first signature. The second signature is more focused on the Norwich project. And actually it's just my name, it's just my name and then the two websites. The first one is the Norwich website, and it's just one line explaining what we do. The second one is the Postcode Films website. So small bits of information, they're not even to do with the email address, but it just gives a snapshot of what we do and what I do within the organisation there in the choice of signatures. Yeah, I need a water break, sorry.
I'll say something. Elhum's been talking for ages. Elhum does more of this sort of stuff, which is why she's been talking about it for a long time. But I guess I have 3 reflections on approaching people. I'm normally doing it from a slightly different standpoint, but if I had three bullet points, there would be: one, be ready, and by that I mean have a coherent entity that you're presenting people with, whether that's you as an individual or you as part of something. And off that, I should say, since presenting ourselves as postcode films rather than Ed Owls or Elhum Shakerifar makes a big difference. So if you are able to combine with like-minded people, that's still working. Yes. If you are able to combine with like-minded people and create some sort of entity, then it will get an energy of its own, especially if you can find a way to make it be specific to a certain field. So we tend to get asked to do a lot of stuff related to education and anthropology for obvious reasons. But you need to always project that well and fully when you meet people. I think what Elhum said is spot on. The first time you only get one chance a lot of the time, so you have to be ready to do that properly. And it's when I'm pitching the featured film that I'm making at the moment, it's been really frustrating, but I've been waiting until I have all the elements in place before I approach a festival or a funder, because otherwise I'm no one and I'm just another name on a list. If you can be as strong as possible the first time, that makes the most sense. The second point, so one is be ready. The second one is be proactive. A lot of our work has come through attending things, agreeing to do things, being in the right places. The university partnership came because we went and did a talk. I think we just went and did it. We didn't get paid, no? Anyway, so we try and grab opportunities to be in places where there's a lot of overlap with our work, and I'll talk a bit more about it tomorrow when I'm talking about the research and the academic stuff, but a lot of that comes out of conversations and attending events and starting to speak to people about possibilities. And one thing I've really learned, I think I was quite, I thought maybe too much that things would come to me when I started doing this. And I didn't like the idea of networking because I'd seen a lot of networking done in not a very nice way. But you come to learn that relationships are actually as important as applications for grants and things like that. It's an element of who you know, not what you know, but actually it's a combination of both. And if you can create those contacts and networks and keep getting on with people, then you will get repeat projects and interest. So that's be proactive, be ready, be proactive. And then the third one I'd say is be persistent. If someone likes your project, it might not be the right time. We've, again, with the academic research stuff, quite a lot of, and also with the education workshops, often something looks like it's going to happen, but it hasn't, and funding rounds take a long time. Institutions are busy with lots of other stuff. But if you keep that dialogue up and you keep occasionally going to have meetings, trying to get the ball moving, then often something will result of it. And there'll be lots of dead ends along the way, but it's worth persisting just because it doesn't come off the first time. So those are my less practical, more hypothetical tips. Be ready, proactive and persistent, and hopefully Elhum's voice is better.
Yeah, so aside from the all really, really good points, I thought next to bring up a page of a foundation you might know. It's Anne Lind Foundation. Is it your turn now to do copying? The Anne Lind Foundation funds international projects, often projects which involve collaboration, cooperation between several different territories. So technically quite probably quite broad projects, large projects, and cross-cultural projects. And I just thought it'd be quite useful to look at this website in the same way as the British Council website. With the website of a potential funder, I'd spend 3 hours just reading everything. You get a sense of their language, you get a sense of what they're interested in, you get a sense of who they've funded, what they've funded, and that will really, really help you put together a pitch to them. So read up about them. Here you have an in-depth explanation of the call for projects for 2013. This is past, but it will give you an idea of what they fund. You can see the projects that they funded in the past, and you can have a look and see whether the things that you're suggesting would fit into their formats and whether they might fund it. But something that's very important to bear in mind is that if you don't fit the requirements of a specific funder, don't try and force your project into it. I think when I first started producing, I would apply to everything. And that's very time consuming, and also it's not very productive because you won't get funded by any of those things. If you really read through and select what you will apply to, you're much more likely to write a stronger proposal, and you're much more likely to get a response. It's all about the fit, and it's all about understanding why an organization does what they do and trying to fit your interests together as a sense. So always have a look at their call, have a look at their application, have a look at their frequently asked questions. This is probably what everyone says, but the most useful thing you can do is get a sense of what they actually do and see whether what you want to do matches what they do. There's a really nice page on the Anna Lindh Foundation called Project Ideas, and it's basically a wall of ideas, projects that people run in different countries, and they're always looking for collaborators. And it's a really nice idea. It basically means that they support projects that will link together. And it comes back to the idea of partnerships. A lot of the projects that we've set up in the past have been the result of several different partners coming together and planning something together. And this is exactly the same thing, only it's suggesting the project to you with the partners already in place, asking whether you'd be interested to also be part of it. So it's worth considering being involved at all different stages in different ways with other projects and with organizations as well. So there was no magic kind of solution to the issues of funding, but I hope there's a couple of like practical ways of thinking through. The one really key thing, just like the emails, is be succinct. You don't have to write pages and pages and pages. The shorter and clearer you can be, the better. And if someone is interested, they'll ask for more. And that's always the better way of pitching, I find. And particularly because I do get a lot of pitches as well, much more films, not for funding. And the more clear it is, the shorter, the better, always. Because then it actually makes me want to see a film rather than read 3 pages about it when I'm a bit overwhelmed and then don't really know. But then I feel bad and I think, okay, well maybe I'll watch the trailer. It's not quite the same relationship to a project.
But can I just say, I think I'm right in saying, I would say around 80% of our work is through relationships or word of mouth and meeting people. I think the number of things we've actually got funded, except maybe the school one was a official fund, and the one in Georgia is British Council. But almost everything else across all spheres of our work is because we've spoken about the work we've done and met relevant people and attended events and that sort of thing. So you really can't. Some of that has fed into funds that exist, but it's not to be underestimated.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as a result of that, I suppose when we do then want to apply to specific things, we come with a portfolio ready that illustrates the work that we have done, and that puts you in a stronger position. So yeah, but partnerships really is the main thing, I think. Working with your strengths and other organisations' strengths is the best way to move forward in a really solid way. And not to duplicate work. I think that's what funders also quite like to see. Just in going back to the being prepared to approach a funder, also think quite, be prepared to provide information. So for example, if you want to approach someone and say, we've got this great project, we're going to be working with 15, 12-year-olds on, how, I don't know, their imaginations, I don't know, something like that. So if you approach a funder whose brief is to support 12-year-olds' imagination, and that's their perfect project, so the first thing they're going to tell you is, when, where, how, what, and how much is it going to cost. You need to be ready for all of those questions before you even email them for the first time, so that when they get back to you, it's a very fast response that you give them, and you give them all the tools and the things that they need. It's also, partners and funders and supporters like to know that other people are already supporting you, so that you're building a network. The bigger your network, the more sustainable your project is going to be, the more likely it is that it will take place. So do demonstrate how you've achieved certain things. So you could say, okay, so we're going to be running this workshop, and the camera hire is being given to us in kind by organisation X, and that's the value of the cameras that they're lending to us over the course of 1 month is £10,000, €10,000. That's a really good thing for a funder to know, because it means the value of €10,000 has already been committed to you, and it's like a vote of confidence from another organisation. It's a way that you're being savvy, you're being clever with the budget that you have and how you can work with it. And it also means that, so if they put some money in as well, they're actually sure that they're going to be helping you complete the project as a whole. So it's being savvy in that way is also quite helpful. And when you approach funders, think and have all of those things ready, and show that you've thought through all of those different elements, particularly budget-wise. I don't know what time it is. What time is it?
May I ask you a question?
Yeah. Oh.
You seem to tackle public funders most of the time, and I was just wondering if you have any experience with private companies?
Well, companies or individuals, a lot less for projects, a lot more for films, or so more from like a producer capacity. And I think it's very much the same thing. So if, for example, you're looking for sponsorship from a company, they might have a remit to, they might have a social corporate responsibility remit, or they might have a charity remit. But that remit still has a definition, it still has boundaries, it still has the things that they're interested in supporting. The company as a whole might have, for example, a really developed diversity brief, or it might have a specific interest in, I don't know, wind turbines, or it might have it might have a link with China, for example. So if those specific interests can link with the project that you're doing, then it's more likely to be of interest to them. So it's very much the same thing applied to a slightly different setup. Essentially, I think. And I think with individuals, it can also be the same thing. Generally, individual funders or sponsors will come on board where they have like a personal interest or a personal stake in what you're saying or suggesting or pitching to them. And you'll probably come across them through forums or networks, or having been at events, or where things interest them specifically as individuals. So essentially, I think it's always the same thing. And I think it's very much a process of researching and really knowing who it is that you're pitching to, and knowing that it is also in their interest to be hearing from you. And I don't really think that any of these things are done completely out of just goodwill. I think there always has to be something that chimes, something has to connect. Are there any other questions on the funding stuff? Well, we had one, I wanted to, well, one more slide really, which was, the very, is it the oh no, it's not the last one. So the last thing that I was going to show you was Kickstarter, and I'm sure you've heard about crowdfunding, but crowdfunding is a really good way of raising money. It's a really labor-intensive way as well. It's not the easiest thing, but you can raise money for creative projects through something like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, and it is worth thinking about when you're setting up a project, because it helps you conceptualize the work that you're doing. That's the first thing. It builds an audience around it, and also it's money that's not tied to any specific purpose. You're very clear about what it's going to be for, so the people who engage with you are the people who should want you to achieve that goal and nothing else. It is, however, still a transaction in a sense, so you suggest that people support your work in exchange for certain gifts or stakes or something in relation to the project. So,
can I just check, is crowdfunding well known? Do you guys all use it and stuff? Yeah.
So it is, it's something that basically more and more people in the creative industries are turning to. I think it's deceptive in how simple it's made to seem, and but it can be very useful, and it can kind of round out projects, budgets where they fail elsewhere. But Ed can really tell us much more about it, because he has a live Kickstarter project at the moment and worked really hard on setting it up. So I think the first thing to take into account is, just like when you're looking at a funder's page and spend 3 hours reading it, if you want to set up a Kickstarter project, you probably need to spend at least 3 weeks planning it. Would that be about right? Okay. So I'll bring up the page.
Yeah, I think Kickstarter is, I mean, going to be really useful for if we're not talking about films, just like the one Elhum had on the page then was a participatory project, and to get the first ream of those off the ground, I think it's a really useful device, because once you've done it once and successfully funded it, you can then approach private or public sector and say, look, we raised this much money, these were the outputs, this was how many people we reached in terms of audience and stakeholders. And then you're not very likely, you're much more likely to get funded again. So it's gone up since I last looked. This is, I think, I won't repeat all of what Elhum's already said, because it's essentially the same process you go through. This is my film about the auction house. I'm approaching private sector people who are, it's called A Tale of Two Brothers, so I'm approaching companies that are run by brothers or have brothers in the title. I'm also approaching auctioneers and auction houses and TV antiques personalities, as well as all the wider film documentary community, anyone with a connection to the city of Calcutta or links between England and India. And just, it's been a lot of work spending 3 weeks creating a strategy to raise the money, and now it's underway, tweeting and Facebook and all that sort of nonsense. Have a look if you want.
We should watch it now.
I'm not sure we should.
I think we should watch it now, because so the pitch that you need to do yourself, be prepared for your elevator pitch or your email. Actually, on Kickstarter, you need to tape this video, and that's like a pitch that you make to the internet community. So the ideal is to feature yourself in a pitch, and also to feature information about the project that you want to pitch. It's exactly the same format as what the email would have been, or what you'll tell someone. It's just that it's a pitch to people online. You've got no idea who might see this. It's got to have all those elements in it. So maybe we can judge whether Ed has all his elements in it.
The interesting thing is, in the statistics, Kickstarter actually is, just in terms of research for fundraising, is worth reading the site, because it has lots of research on what works and what doesn't. And for example, projects with a video, i.e. where you're seeing the person, have something like a 50% better success rate, which links into kind of what I was saying about relationships and turning up and meeting people and getting things going. It's going to be much more effective than sending someone a document, I think. But this is also going to be excruciating, so I might leave the room. This is also not an attempt to get you to donate, by the way. I didn't know this was going to happen.
Right. The promise.
Old slide viewer. Very nice old slide viewer.
Beautiful.
1,000. 1,100 women. 2,000 rupees last time.
My name's Ed, and I'm a filmmaker based in London. For the last 4 years, I've been making a film about two brothers trying to save their family business, the oldest auction house in India. It was bought in 1940 by their grandfather, and for years was the Sotheby's of India. But today it's struggling to find a way to survive in the age of eBay, Amazon, and India's fast-rising shopping mall culture. My film's got two main characters. The elder brother is called Anwar, and he left India at the age of 18 to live and work in London. For the last 40 years, he's done everything from bus conducting to international finance. On the other hand, his younger brother Arshad stayed behind in India and has spent his whole life running the auction house. He thinks the place is going downhill along with the city itself, and wonders whether his elder brother has lost touch with the present-day reality of the city they both grew up in. I started filming around 3 years ago when Anwar returned to India in an effort to try and save his beloved auction house from failure.
We are responsible for over 100-150 families. Let's all be proud of this place, and let us make everybody feel proud of this place. Okay, this is our identity.
Rustle exchange is an idea in your head right now. It was great at one time. It's virtually extinct now.
You are proud and not proud of this article, okay? Don't take pride in saying that we can sell socks also.
I am so proud.
Try to get it inside your pretty head.
He was faced by all sorts of obstacles, his brother included. Over the years, I've seen him run a catwalk fashion show for Indian supermodels, give the place its first facelift in decades, as well as fending off land developers who wanted to turn it into the city's first Playboy bar. But as well as seeing all the changes in the auction house, I've witnessed the change between the two brothers as they learn to live together under the same roof for the first time since they were teenagers. They're trying to uphold their father's legacy and find a place for the Rustle exchange in the harsh economic realities of modern India.
In the beginning it was difficult to swallow that we have come for, permanently here.
So you're happy I'm here?
I am very happy.
Are you overjoyed?
I'm not overjoyed because you never leave me alone, you know. You still think that I'm your kid brother, that kid who was 12 years old or 13 years old.
We're now coming towards the end of post-production and want to get the film seen as widely as possible. So far, an enormous amount of people have given loads of time and effort, but we really need some extra funding to get us over the finish line. We need finance to cover the last bit of editing, the sound mix, the colour grade, as well as getting the licensing for a few tracks of music, and we'd really appreciate any help you can give. The Russell Exchange is a unique place that brings together people from across Indian society. It holds a special place in the life of Calcutta and its inhabitants, as well as loads of people we've met across the world during our filming. So we'd really appreciate it if you're able to give some money or pass this on to anyone you know who would like to support the film and get it seen as widely as possible. And with that, thank you for watching, and I'd like to open the bidding. Two, 3 weeks.
Long time went into this pitch. That was basically that was basically the main message. Is that I think a long time goes into making it. Do you want to say something?
How many minutes?
The film, 90. Two versions, one festival. Oh, that was 3 minutes. 3.5 maybe. Bit long.
Okay.
Matteo says we have to go.
When I start to think maybe if this must be hand now, it ended. So
Yeah. Okay, good. Left you wanting more.
Good. So I think we need to wrap up for today, but tomorrow morning we're going to start at 9 o'clock, and tomorrow morning we're going to look at examples of participatory photography projects and also research projects using participatory mediums, and we're going to get you to do more active stuff that we didn't manage to get you to do today. But hopefully you can all make it for 9 a.m. And thank you. It's been a nice day.
Thanks, guys. And we'll be somewhere in Bari this evening. Matteo knows.